Our correspondent, Bernard Akede, joins us now for more updates live from the UNGA venue, that is, of course, in New York, United States. Bernard, what do you make of the speech by President William Ruto, the president of Kenya, and what some people have described as a scathing remark against the global institution?
Thank you, Ligon, for having me. To be honest, I think what the president of Kenya, President William Ruto, who we saw a few minutes ago, I think what he said basically is going to be a reflection of what almost every African president is going to say. If you remember, most of the conversations we've been having, even before UNGA started, have been reverberating around whether or not, first of all, this particular organization, talking about United Nations, is still as relevant as it used to be, whether or not this organization still holds as much power and control over different governments around the world as they used to be, whether or not Africa is truly and duly represented, in the United Nations body as it should be. Still talking about Africa having a permanent seat in the Security Council, the same things that we spoke about last year. So the complaints are larger than the celebrations, to be honest. When President Donald Trump of the United States lambasted the United Nations yesterday, it was a speech he gave that kind of shook, I beg your pardon, the foundations of this entire building which we're standing in, and some were quite critical, or some critique to what he said. But if we truly look deeply into what Trump has said, it's not far from what many other presidents, particularly the African presidents, are saying around this time. It's just that Trump said it in a harsher way, to be honest, and these leave so many questions to be asked. Questions like foreign debt, which the developing countries have to pay a lot more than the developed countries, leading such developing countries not to be able to meet their targets of SDGs in terms of education, in terms of health, water resources, sanitation, and all of that. Also talking about trade, talking about countries spending more in building weapons than in than in eradicating hunger. So what President William Ruto said, again, if you put it side by side, what President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa said yesterday, you will see that there's not much difference. And I can almost promise you that almost every African leader who steps onto that podium will say about the same thing, or at least something similar.
So how do you think that the United Nations will respond to these somewhat criticisms, most especially coming from powerful countries and countries from other underrepresented areas, as regards to what needs to be done to ensure inclusivity when it comes to dealing with global challenges?
Well, I think at this point, it's not how they will respond, it's what they should do, as a matter of fact. We've gone past the stage of responses. We've gone past talking the talk. It's time to walk the walk, as a matter of fact. These are songs that were sung 3 years ago, 2 years ago, last year, and we're hearing the same thing right now. Sorry, and we're hearing the same things right now at the moment. Now the issue is, these things are happening, right? There are wars going on across the globe. There's injustice, there's insecurity growing, there's hunger growing, and then the Security Council has almost lost its strength, so to speak, such that, the United Nations is basically just speaking and saying and condemning issues going on around the world, condemning issues in Gaza, condemning Russia-Ukraine war, but then besides just the condemnation, what actions are being taken? So I think rather than the United Nations body responding, what people want to see is our actions going forward.
All right, before I let you go, Bernard, I remember that President William Ruto also talked about African countries gradually becoming financially self-sufficient. From what you've seen so far in terms of interactions and commitments and collaborations, do you think that Africa is pivoting towards that narrative?
Sorry, Leko, could you take that again, please?
Okay, so I said President William Ruto talked about Africa gradually becoming financially self-sufficient. And I'm asking, from your interactions and conversations that I've held on at UNGA of late, do you think that Africa is actually pivoting towards that narrative?
Okay, to be honest with you, Leko, I think Africa has the potential to become self-sufficient, and I think some African countries are gradually pivoting and moving towards that direction. But it will take a while, and it will take several indices. First of all, government policies, more collaboration by African countries themselves, intentionality by African leaders, and then some sustainability based on certain things that already have been achieved. And also, Africa would need to move away, from conflict issues to issues that issues that I would say that hammer more on sustainability and development. When we're talking about whether we're talking about infrastructure, whether we're talking about education, or talking about agriculture, it's not impossible for Africa to do, as was discussed at the Global Africa Business Initiative, which was one of the side events of UNGA this year. It's not impossible for Africa to do, but it just takes intentionality, and it takes the right policies from African leaders. Again, like many have said, Africa itself will solve Africa's problems, not the rest of the world. So if truly we're going to get there, we need to start from us first. But again, I believe that it is possible. It is close. We are getting close to it. Will all African nations get there, meet these SDGs by 2030? Maybe not. We could achieve some of them, but yes, Africa is indeed tending towards self-sustainability. We just need the right policies and intentionality by the leaders.
All right, thank you so much, Bernard Akede, for sharing these details with us on the news.